A few days ago, we talked about a very dark and heavy story involving the caravan that stormed the border this past Sunday. So today, I'd like to balance that out and I'd like to talk about something that I actually found to be one of the funniest stories I've seen thus far this year. It could possibly be one of the funniest stories I've seen in my life. People who were paying attention to Twitter before the migrant caravan hit the border would have noticed that off in the little trending column over on the left, they would have seen the trending hashtag thotaudit. I heard about this and I started looking down into what the thought audit was, and I thought that it was one of the dumbest things that I've seen in the news, but it was one of those dumb things that you start reading into and you suddenly just can't look away because the entire world has officially been turned upside down and you don't know which side is up, which side is down, and which side is left and which side is right. From what I've been able to gather from the articles I've been reading about the thought audit, a Facebook user named David Wu started a campaign on Facebook for young men to turn around and report anybody who had a premium Snapchat to the IRS for tax evasion, assuming that the people with the premium Snapchats, and by people I mean young hot girls who want to get paid a little bit of money for showing themselves off, were taking on this money as a wage and not reporting it to the IRS. And as soon as this went viral, Newsweek and many other mainstream news sources started tapping out articles as fast as they could, trying to discourage the people who were turning the women in for the thought audit and trying to demonize anybody who thought it was a good thing. As I was reading about this news story and as I was talking to people about this news story in preparation for making this video, I noticed a common theme among the conversations and among the news stories out there. There is an assumption out there that people who use a premium Snapchat are taking in upwards of $100,000, possibly a little less, possibly a little bit more, but usually upwards in that range for having a premium Snapchat. As a person who was recently singled within the last year, and a person who became very busy working his 40-hour-a-week job and launching this channel, I can tell you that I've used some online dating sites to try and offset my singlehood, and I have run across people who sell their premium Snapchat. I have not bought a premium Snapchat subscription because it's really, really expensive. Well, it's usually not really that expensive, but I didn't want to spend the money on it when I could go on to Google Images and get some of the same images for free. Maybe not the same women, but other women. But I can tell you by the way that it's marketed that the women who are putting out a premium Snapchat are not making $100,000 a year on the premium Snapchat. Their subscriptions are generally for sale for something around a $25 Amazon gift card as a one-time fee. Generally, if they're making that kind of money, they're doing so through a Patreon or a PayPal, which is reporting their earnings to the IRS already. And it's for a different service other than this premium Snapchat. One of the other things that I noticed while I was reading mainstream news articles in preparation for this video is the way that the authors of these articles were referring to women who have a premium Snapchat. All of the women that they were referring to were called sex workers, which I think is completely disingenuous when you really think about what's going on, what's being sold, and the transaction that's taking place. Now, I understand the fact that by technicality, yes, these women are sex workers. They are providing a sexual service to men who are willing to pay and benefiting the rewards from it. But when you start referring to these women as sex workers, first off, you've implied that this is their career. And in some cases, yes, it is their career, but they offer different services to be in their careers. However, the majority of time with a premium Snapchat, you've got a 20-year-old girl who's in college trying to pay some bills outside of the menial job that she's doing out there and taking in things like Amazon gift cards and small donations for posting a couple of pictures a week on a subscription-based Snapchat service. I think it's disingenuous, and I think it's honestly a little bit disgusting to compare these young women who are hustling the system just a little bit to common streetwalkers that the feminist movement on the same side as these mainstream news articles abhor and hate. When David Wu and Rouge V launched this campaign against the quote sex workers who have premium Snapchats and charge men to look at their Snapchat pictures and ogle over them and do whatever else it is that they do when they look at these pictures, the main focus that they were putting on was taxation. The assumption, as I mentioned before, was the fact that the women who had these services and were offering these services were making exorbitant amounts of money off of them and not reporting it as taxable income to the federal government, therefore denying the federal government the income that they would have had taxing the income of the particular sex work. As I mentioned before, if these women are providing these services and taking on the amounts of money that David Wu and Rouge V are claiming that they are taking on, then they would have to be using some sort of a payment processor to do so. They would have a PayPal or they would have a Patreon, and either way there would be a paper record of the amount of money that they were taking in, and there would also most likely be a paper record of how they were using that kind of money. And in both cases, both companies do report earnings up to a certain point to the federal government as taxable income. I would have normally left this fact out of the script, and in fact in the first script that I wrote for this video I did leave this fact out. But as I was reading more into the phenomenon that was going on in the articles that I've linked in the description below this video, I noticed that this entire story started because of a feud that Rouge V had with Twitch streamer Brittany Venti. Brittany Venti has claimed to make $50,000 or more a year offering other services other than her streaming, and that would have included a premium Snapchat. The details right now as to why Brittany Venti's premium Snapchat was disabled and why she has locked her accounts temporarily are still a mystery at this time. But, as I mentioned before, $50,000 for a premium Snapchat is a very outsized number, and it is definitely not the norm. Most of the time, the girls who are offering these services are making $300 to $500 a year on that, if that, and it's usually all in gift cards or Amazon gifts from a wish list. Depending on the tax bracket that the woman would fall into based on her other income sources, the taxes that would be levied against the amount of money collected from a premium Snapchat in any normal circumstance would be between $50 and $150. It would cost more than that in lawyers, court fees, and collection fees to collect that kind of money over the course of a year. This is not going to be something that the IRS is going to seriously expend any resources into it. In fact, this entire story seems to start from a point in which Rouge V and David Wu were circulating a whistleblower article from the IRS website in which it's heavily advertised that people can get rewards from the federal government for turning people in who are knowingly evading their taxes. And I stress the word knowingly because that is one of the clauses, is that the person has to be knowingly evading the taxes. There are other clauses in there. Anybody who's actually reporting somebody and going to be taken seriously does need to know quite a bit of information about the person that they're turning in, including the person's social security number, ironically enough. And that's not information that your normal person who would be reporting this kind of behavior is going to have or is going to be able to get any sort of access to. And once again, we need to talk about the fact that any of these perceived rewards that would be offered to the people who are turning these women in would cost more than the $50 to $150 that would be levied against the woman who is being audited for her premium Snapchat. I don't want to be too hard on the type of man who is turning these women in for this tax evasion, because I call a lot of men like this friend. Not necessarily any of the men who are actually doing that, but the same kind of personality profile. And what I've noticed about the type of men who are doing this and turning these women in is that in any other normal circumstance, a lot of them are on online message boards, including Discord, screaming that taxation is theft. And I think that's kind of ironic that they are now going out and forcing somebody to pay extra taxes on a relatively small amount of income. Conversely, if you read some of the mainstream articles and you see some of the people out there who are taking to social media and defending these women and saying that there's no reason that they should have to pay the taxes on such a service, so long as they're making under a certain amount, you start to look at the fact that a lot of the people that are doing this defending are the same people who cry and scream when an independent contractor underreports or a small business owner takes advantage of a legal item in his itemization and avoids paying $15 in sales tax somewhere. And I'm not saying that all of the people who are defending the women who provide these services are that way. There are a lot of good, consistent libertarians that I follow on Twitter who would agree with the sentiment that I'm going to put into the end of this video in my final thoughts. I just think it's funny and especially ironic the fact that in this specific instance, the roles are completely 180 degrees reversed between the two sides that are playing and would normally be playing in a field like this. In closing, I'll say this. Ladies who have a premium Snapchat and provide it out, you can pay your taxes or don't. It doesn't really matter to me, and it shouldn't really matter to anybody who's turning you in or anybody who's rushing to your defense. This is between you and the governments under whose jurisdiction you live and work. Possibly your tax accountant as well, if he or she is involved with filing your taxes for you. Additionally, if you want to continue providing services like this, or if you want to lock your accounts over this entire situation, I could see the merits in going both directions. As far as the services go and the fact that women are being turned in for providing them for the crime of not paying enough taxes out there, I do think that there is a level of sexual frustration that comes from the clientele that's turning the women in. They are receiving these pictures, but they're not getting any sort of real gratification out of it, and I think that plays a role in this. However, I think there is a level of natural selection that goes along with it. As long as there are going to be men who are willing to shell out money, sometimes to the point in which they ruin themselves financially, just to see a couple of pictures a week that are going to disappear after 10 seconds, that's natural selection. It's a transaction between two consenting adults, and I don't really see any reason to step in and try and stop it. If the men don't learn after a couple of times of being frustrated and losing out on all of their money to enjoy these services, then they do deserve the consequences that they incur from doing so. And I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of free stuff on the internet that you don't have to pay a fee to have access to. You can just go on Google and look it up. I can attest to it, and in all honesty, Shapiro wrote an entire book on it. So it's not like we don't know that it's out there. The fact that it is out there and people are spending money to get something else that they perceive as better is a little bit sad in my eyes, but it is the choice of both people on either end of the transaction. What do you think about the thought audit? Do you think they should be paying their taxes, or do you think we should be looking the other way? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.
You're always there for me in my